I suppose. So yeah, today's webinar is going to be on video walls, video distribution, really essentially what are all the options for us to get video across to different people within your facility. So let's go ahead and dive right into it. So we're going to talk about live video as a resource. Who really needs it? Why do they need it? We'll talk about the solutions. So the solutions involve, utilizing some of the NVRs built-in outputs, decoders, video walls, some of the AV solutions that also get combined here, like HDMI extenders, splitters, and then we'll bring it together in an example as well. So, and then we'll have Q&A. So, a little bit about SCW, if this is your first time going to one of our webinars. We're a value-driven company with end-to-end solutions, so we can do free consultations. We have install or self-install, so whether you're looking for more of a turnkey, get it all done, or if you're looking to self-install this, we're happy to do either. And if you're a security camera dealer, an audio video dealer, we have a great dealer program that we can get you info on. And our key to fame has always been world-class support. Really kind of frame ourselves as a support company that happens to be involved in video and in security solutions. So the other potential title for this webinar could be like eyes of the operation or something like that. I Live video tends to be one of the most important things in certain industries. So we'll talk about that. Um, because cameras are used for more than just incidents, especially nowadays. Security cameras have in the past just been something that a lot of people use for, hey, there's a security incident or some kind of incident, they need to pull the footage. Um, Nowadays, we're seeing significantly more and more increase on people that are relying on the live video feeds to do their job. Whether it's a operations team that's watching, something come by in a manufacturing plant, or somebody in the security room that's watching them live. It really varies. Um, the other people also exist that maybe it's not entirely relying on it, but it's greatly enhanced by having that video access. And so some of the people like that are going to be, your front desk. The front desk wants to know who's coming in, who's at the entrances, who's outside. Definitely video is a big part of that. Any kind of safety roles when somebody's sitting there watching and trying to make sure that people have equipment on and that things are operating right and people are operating safely. They need instant video access and they need it kind of consistently and constantly be able to do their job. Um, Managers of every kind of color, right? One of the most common ones we actually deal with are car dealerships, and the sales manager always wants to keep a good eye on what's going on with the lot. And for him, he just wants to look up, see that there's people on the lot or there's not, and how quickly the salespeople are going out there to talk to them. And he just, that video plays a huge part in it. Manufacturing operators, of course, too, like I mentioned, that's a very common one where video plays a massive part. We actually did a webinar on production monitoring as well that kind of goes into some of that too. And this is remote and local. So, a lot of times, especially in these ones that like your operators and everything like that, they may be local, but there's also remote people who need to keep eye on things live as well. And as I mentioned before, the most common roles we're going to run into are any kind of guards or security personnel that just need video access is, to be able to do their job. Safety teams, management, receptions, operations, and more. There's also another segment of people. Anytime we install a security camera system inside a facility that maybe had I would say maybe didn't have a security system, it's a new building, or maybe they had a very lackluster one that they couldn't access. Once the idea that, hey, we got a new security camera system, everyone can access the video if they want to, all of a sudden everyone starts raising their hand to say, hey, I want video. I could use that. Oh, it'd be great for me to have that. And sometimes it's a little bit more legit than others. And so we have to kind of keep that in mind in terms of video is considered sort of an unlimited resource that people think like, hey, I can just put it on my computer and I'm going to be able to see all my cameras. But of course, it's a little bit more complicated than that. We've got to consider things like bandwidth, PC, server bandwidth, everything like that, especially with the larger systems. So we're going to go over all that. Um, so really what the questions we want to ask when we first are dealing with somebody who's building up this system, and in some ways when we're building out a security camera system, sometimes the video system and who has video and how they get it becomes a system in itself. We have to kind of figure out who's going to get it, how often they're going to be looking at it, and then provide the right solution for that person. So let's talk about the potential solutions on the shelf here. So the first one is the NVR. So every NVR that we have is basically a free viewing station. So what that means is that you can plug in a display, whether that's a monitor, TV, whatever, through HDMI or VGA, depending on the NVR, right? Um, and so there's no additional charge for using this. You're already most likely getting an NVR to record and everything like that. So for this to exist on its own, to give somebody like that manager in the sales office, the sales manager at the car dealership, a free viewing station without having to buy additional computers or anything like that, that's a big plus for that solution. And it just simplifies it a lot. Um, and the nice thing about this is a dedicated monitor as well. And that's one thing that we have to factor in as we go through and talk about video walls and everything like that. But um, having a dedicated, unfettered access to the video, so that means that somebody doesn't have to go and open up a program on their computer to go see video. They don't have to open up their tablet or phone to see video. It means that they can just kind of look to the right, see video, and there's a lot of roles that need that again, unfettered access to the video. And this is one of the ways we can deliver it through either HDMI or the VGA connection on it. And there's a lot of advantages besides the fact that it's just built in. So one of the great things is that, the NVR is already using this video. So it's not using any additional resources to display this video. It's also not going to use any additional bandwidth. So if there's any bandwidth constraints on the network, this is a great way of dealing with that. And a lot of times when we set up these systems, we're setting them up to where when you connect the HDMI to it, it's also the lowest latency and the smoothest video possible. It's basically a direct connection. And um, for those who aren't familiar, what latency means, it's just the delay between what's happening in the real world and what you're seeing on the video. And depending on the connection and where you're located and everything like that, could be, you know, half a second, or it could be, multiple seconds depending on all that configuration. And so the NVR Direct is always going to present the least amount of latency because it doesn't have to go and send it to your computer, everything like that. So that's going to be really important for those people who are operating machinery with this, or options like that. So if it's in a cab or something like that, we usually try to put an NVR in there because we do know it's going to be much quicker, much less latency than doing it through a computer or something like that. Um, and again, it doesn't require a computer, so that's an investment that you don't have to make. It's already built in there. It's providing a lot of value for that. And live view and playback are available because you can plug in a mouse and you can do full settings, playback, live view, whatever they need to do. And again, to that same point of that unfettered video access, when that person walks into their office and they've got a dedicated display for the video feeds that they want, it's always going to be there. They don't have to go and open up software, everything like that. And that's a really important thing. I know I'm kind of hammering it down, but the least amount of friction we can get to get video, the better. Now, there are some limits, of course, to every solution, and an NVR definitely has limits. NVRs typically, always this is going to depend across the board, but they usually only have a couple of display outputs. So in our case, our most commonly sold ones either have two HDMI and a VGA, or they have one HDMI and a VGA. And another big consideration too is that you want to figure out, are these outputs what we call independent? So what that means is you can kind of display, you can see up here, I've got different sets of cameras on this one than this one. This has 4 cameras displayed. This has about 10 or whatever it is. And so that means that you can have separate camera outputs on different monitors, and that's a nice thing to do when um, you want to have maybe two monitors in that person's office, or you have somebody else across the facility who also wants access. Maybe you give one of them VGA, the other one HDMI. Um, but there are some systems out there that are what's known as a mirror. So what that means is that when you plug in the HDMI and VGA, they're going to be identical. So do keep that in mind as well. So we kind of wrap up what the NVR offers in this video solution is it pros of it is that it comes included and it really just provides a reliable 24/7 365-day video. And it really does provide the best video experience if you're in one of these systems. Some of the considerations that we look at are going to be, the fact that this is a local only solution. So somebody remote obviously can't use the NVR HDMI. Now I will say that, one of the big concerns even locally at a facility is just the range HDMI can go. And technically there is no specific limit on HDMI, believe it or not. But we do actually, and we'll talk about this a little bit later on, offer HDMI extenders over cat cable, which can, extend them for hundreds of feet across the facility. So, but that is a consideration that, you got to be there kind of close to it. And another one too is that typically, even if you have multiple displays connected to it, you got to designate one of those to be an operator. You won't have like, you can't have like mice on both of them, mouse on both of them. So you gotta choose which one of those screens, whether it's the VGA or the HDMI, to um, to be the operator in that case, and the other one's just sort of a static display. And as I mentioned earlier, as we go through it, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A section, and I'll happily address them as we go through them. You don't have to wait till the end or anything like that. But if there's any questions about NVRs, the live video on them, please just let us know. The next option would be PC viewing. And so there's a lot of flexibility that being able to view your camera system on a PC offers. Obviously, you can kind of put them anywhere inside the facility that has a network connection or outside the facility with an internet connection. Um, Now, there are some considerations with this as well. So, every system's a little different, but typically there's going to be some kind of bottleneck or capacity limit on terms of how many people can actually stream off that NVR or server. And so that's going to vary in terms like, if you have 20 people trying to view camera systems, you may run into some snags there. As well as bandwidth considerations too. One of the other major ones that, even if all that kind of is out of the way, is the fact that using software, you're typically running this on a Windows computer, right? And Windows is a full operating system, right? So you've got to have distraction. You're gonna have potential distractions there, whether it's Windows updates or something that may distract the operator that you don't get with like a dedicated display. And then the other side of this too, that kind of is in the same boat, is software requires some level of training. When you get somebody who's now operating the software, it's a really good idea just to kind of give them a quick training on exactly, how do you do live view? How do you do playback? Um, and that's difficult to sometimes do when you've got people like, when you got guards or, um, stuff like that then may be somebody who's more of a contract basis to where they come in once a week, or there's a different person every day, and you can't necessarily train them on software. So that becomes a challenge in itself. And then of course too, PCs are there's a cost there to purchasing the hardware and maintaining it as well. And to go again a little bit more into the distraction side, if you're a larger, most of our larger clients, they also have to get IT involved with any kind of purchasing when it comes to the PCs too. And, that means they're going to have to go through certain vendors and, have certain policies on this and everything like that. And locking that down to where, they can only use the software and stuff like that. So that's kind of part of the adding a complexity to the solution that maybe we try to avoid as much as possible if we can. And so Sometimes it's not an issue, just a matter of getting that IT team involved. A lot of times it's not an issue, I should say. But that may become into it. And then we've got to make sure the operator, again, knows how to use a computer, knows how to, use the software, and that also that computer has solid specs. It's not one that you can just grab the 8-year-old laptop in the closet and expect to run 30 cameras perfectly. It's going to need something that's a little bit more modern than that. So if we kind of wrap up the PC real quick, and I should mention too that we do have both webinars and videos on our specific software solution and all of the features there. So I won't go into a lot of detail on that right now. There's obviously a lot of things that do benefit from viewing on the PC, like the ability to view multiple locations in one area, multiple systems, etc. So there's definitely a lot of advantages to PC viewing and a lot of flexibility in that too for the people who need it. So, which brings us up to our pros and cons, and that is the flexibility. You've got so much. You can view it anywhere. I can bring my laptop all across the world and see my camera systems. Whether that's again at the facility, remote, across the country, all good. And then the power of it too. Like once you get somebody who knows how to use the software, it's definitely a much more powerful way of viewing the camera system. A lot more options there, a lot more customization there. Um, and some of the considerations, like again, solid PC, you're going to need that regardless of what software you decide to go with. Video is a pretty intensive application for most computers, so you just want to make sure it doesn't have to be a supercomputer, but you want to make sure it's from the last couple of years, really. Um, IT may need to be involved to either source, set up, maintain that computer, put the computer on its policies, etc. Um, Bandwidth and resource use is definitely a consideration. Fortunately, with a lot of what we do in our software, there's a lot of stuff that does it to reduce the bandwidth. So we're not going to completely crash networks by viewing it, but it is something to consider, especially if you're looking at other software to make sure that they're using multiple streams and everything like that. Um, and then more distractions and more training required. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking about a PC that, you know, how computer literate is that person? How comfortable are they going to be using software, etc. And one last thing, I didn't include it on here, but PC viewing, with us, the software is free, and so that just comes with the system when you buy it with us, and that's included. Some other stuff, the VMS software to be able to actually view the camera system could cost additional depending on how many computers you put it on. It could be a monthly or yearly fee, regardless of how many devices. So there's another level of cost there that you may have to factor in too. And before we hit decoders and go into kind of more of a video wall setup, got a couple questions I'll go ahead and start addressing now. So the first one that we got is there an option to go full screen when motion is detected on selected cameras? And yes, there is from at least on our systems, again, depending on where you're looking at that from. So if you're on what we call the local interface, so the one that's directly connected to the NVR, there's an option that I believe is called pop-up window. And I have to double check that maybe with our support team, or we can get you in touch with them to walk you through setting it up. But basically, you can have it pop up the full screen window when either motion or an analytic is detected. So that's definitely possible. The next question is we have one of our Imperial 32 channel NVRs with two HDMI outputs. The HDMI outputs are independent. We have a separate monitor for each one. We have 28 cameras. There's a way to add a third monitor so we can watch the 28 cameras. So I'd have to double check this specifically because we do have a couple different Imperial 32s, but I believe the VGA on that one is actually independent as well. So you could connect the VGA monitor. But if not, if it is a mirror on that case, then the next thing might be a decoder, which we'll talk about here in just a second. But great questions. So yeah, let's talk about decoders. So this is one of these things that a lot of people aren't quite aware of, or they're sort of confused by in some ways. And so decoders are just one of the other solutions that we have in our pocket for video solutions. And um, our decoders are network based, and so what that means is you plug them into the network and you set them up, and this allows a lot of flexibility in the placement, sort of like the PC, right? All we need is a network connection in order to deliver video to a station, whether that's a video wall kind of set up here in a security room, like you see here on this top image, or it's more like, a single monitor that's out on the floor. So it gives us a lot of flexibility. And we have both a 12, a 6, and we just actually added a 1 HDMI decoder. And um, this is what the 6 HDMI one looks like from the back here. So you can actually see on the back here, we've got the HDMI port. So really, the easiest way of describing what a decoder is it's just basically a bunch of HDMI ports on the back of the device. And those HDMI ports give you extra video, live video. And over here we have the network connection as well. And there's a lot to these. Like for example, we have an HDMI input, so you can even like further um, distribute like a video input. So some people will put like their PC screen on there to display some machine info and everything. And again, gets a lot of somewhat complicated, but it is possible to do that. And so this is again another kind of look at what this looks like. So the decoder, you plug it into HDMI, and you can see kind of what that looks like. So HDMI number one can display these cameras. HDMI number two can display just this one camera. And then HDMI number three can display these four cameras. So you have customization in terms of what's actually on each of the HDMI outputs. You could display the same things on them if you wanted to, depending on your output, or they could be all independent. Just whatever you want to do. And so some of the benefits of decoders is that these get set up through our ViewStation software. So it gives you centralized management in terms of what's actually displaying out. So you don't have to physically be at the decoder to determine what's actually displaying on that HDMI. And it's definitely by far the best solution or part of the solution for command centers or security rooms. And another nice advantage of this too is that they can utilize multiple NVRs. So if you're in a large facility and you've got two, three, maybe even four NVRs at the facility, and you need a central place to view all of them, the decoders definitely can talk to both the NVRs from all the different parts of the building or buildings. And again, other pros that they can be basically installed wherever with as long as you have a network connection. Now, some of the considerations with the decoders are these are static walls. So if we look back at this image here, then made it larger here, what we can see is this is a typical decoder setup actually here, a video wall in this case, in this room. And it's combining a lot of what is utilized within our solution, right? So actually it's got basically all three of them set up at the moment. So you can see these ones over here are actually outputted through the decoder. And so these views up here never change. Every morning when this person walks in, he knows that these views are going to be here, and he doesn't have to think about it. And as he's working at his desk and everything like that, if he gets a radio and they say, "Hey, is somebody's coming in or whatever the situation is, they can easily look up and always know that this camera's here. This camera's here. They don't have to go and hunt for that camera on a big screen. And that's one of the other parts of video distribution that's important too, is that, overall, I want to say there's probably about 30 something cameras here. And technically, you could probably display all of those on one screen, right? You could definitely display 32 or even 64 cameras on one display output, but they're going to be very small. And so we've set this up in this way to where obviously these four cameras are quite large, but what that means is that he can see everything that's going on here without having to go and expand it, without having to double click to bring up a camera and make it big. And that's important because when you double click to make a camera big, you do lose your other outputs. So essentially, that's why the video wall concept exists, and we'll cover that a little bit more. But the key thing is when this person walks in, they're able to see the same camera feeds here every single time. Obviously, it is adjustable if they end up wanting to change that around, but that we've got to set up to where they want it. The other part of the solution over here is you see this is actually the view station software. So this is the PC viewing over here. So they've got it connected to their computer, and that allows them to have access there as well if they want to, or potentially do playback. So maybe they need to go and pull footage from the incident. They may use a software for that since the decoder doesn't have mouse control. It's just a static wall, right? So that's again where we typically in these video wall solutions combine solutions. We're very rarely just using decoders or just the NVR. And when you get into this scale or this size, once you get multiple displays, you usually have to mix and match them. So, and then actually speaking of the NVR, the third option, it's actually over here too. So that again allows him to have a mouse kind of over here, I believe, and allows him to grab it and move things around if he wants to. If he knows a certain camera is going to be an important camera today, he can make that one big if he decides to. So there's a lot of flexibility in this setup. Um, and it's provided by the PC, the decoders, and the NVR all in one area, basically. And so to go back to the question we just had about, once you kind of tap out the local HDMI in terms of, okay, I've got the two HDMI connected now, and I really like to have a third monitor, adding a decoder to that solution may be the next thing you want to do, and having a setup like this. So here's another example. This is like a security room here, and you can see the individual operators have their own computers, and they may have the software on there to help, bring up an individual camera if they want to, or go to playback and view previous footage or do incident reports, whatever they need to do here. But these static walls up here are provided by a decoder and they never change. And again, that's really important because some of these operators may end up, being somebody who's more temporary or, again, if you've got a guard that's part of a contract rather than like an actual employee, there's a lot of guard companies will actually switch them out fairly frequently. And so it's really good for them to know that, hey, this camera is always here when they come in. Really important concept. And here's another one, just kind of in a smaller scale. So you can see that this person has, both computers. You can see he's got multiple mice as well as multiple video feeds. And again, typically the way these are set up is that these ones up here are fairly static. So they very rarely switch over to what views they want. So the important cameras are always going to live up there. And then the smaller ones for the individual operator are more customizable and flexible. So to wrap up decoders a little bit, decoders are very similar to NVRs in the sense that they do provide 24/7, 365 video. So you don't have to go and turn on a decoder. They're not running Windows or anything like that. They are dedicated display outputs, sort of just like an NVR in that way. They're in some ways a little bit more flexible. In some ways, in terms of like the fact that there's just static walls, a little bit less flexible, but they do still provide that 365-day, nothing the user has to do to get that video. There's unfettered access to the video. Um, it's also multi-system and centrally managed. So, a lot of times, one of the concerns that people have with operators is obviously, like I mentioned, having to use the software, having to learn it and stuff like that. But what if they change what camera they see and now they don't know how to get that camera feedback? Making this centrally managed eliminates a lot of the issues that you're going to have with that. So that user can't necessarily change that view and lose a camera that they actually need. And decoders are almost limitless in terms of the amount of video we can provide there, right? Like we can set up rooms and set up 911 dispatch rooms across for counties and everything that have dozens of displays in there that are displaying video constantly. So once we get that, the design and the requirements in decoders really open up the possibility. Um, Now, a consideration with decoders is that there likely is no operator control. So again, they're not like the NVR where you just plug in a mouse and move things around or even double click to bring up a camera big. It's a static wall essentially in most decoder setups. Some are different, but most are like that. And then the other consideration is decoders are definitely not um, a cheap solution, I would say. They definitely do, there's a lot of functionality there and everything. So there is a cost with them that probably is about the same. When you think about a PC, it's probably actually going to come less than that. But it's not like the NVR where it's just simply built in. So you do have to factor that in that this could be a decently expensive solution to be able to provide something like that. And so got a question there as well, and I'll go back to the image. Um, they notice that some of our decoders have USB on them, and yes, that exists, but that's actually only for like troubleshooting. So if you plug in a mouse or anything like that, it's actually not going to do anything with it or any kind of keyboard. It won't actually allow you to control it. So um, mostly just there for troubleshooting and fixing things, but not for mouse control. But good eye. Oops. So hopefully, as we've gone through this, one of the things that I've been stressing is a lot of times these solutions all come into we're not just picking one individual solution and kind of running with it, right? We typically mix and match these solutions depending on, how frequently the person needs the video access, how technically inclined they are, or even where they are in the facility. That's all going to determine, what video solution we end up going with. And I wanted to break it down in terms of like an actual example and a fairly kind of common one where there's a need to see live video across a facility. So this is John's Jump House. This is a trampoline park and indoor trampoline park. And to them, video is safety. So employees use live video to monitor for safety, make sure the kids are behaving, that they're playing safe, there's no roughhousing or people going out of the areas where they shouldn't be, etc. And here's kind of a look at it. So we'll go back to this in just a second. But the request number one that they have for us is that the front desk needs video access. And so they're gonna be either keeping an eye on it or looking up in between doing things. And essentially that video has to be something that's really easy for them to access. It can't be again on a computer or something like that. It needs to be unfettered access. And so because the front desk is going to be multitasking, right? They're going to be checking people out. They're going to be issuing socks or whatever else that these trampoline parks have. And so that they can't have something that where they need to perform a task to get that video access. They need to be able to look up while they're taking somebody's card and be able to see what's going on with that video and be able to radio in if something is concerning. So what are we going to do? Here's the front desk up here. So what are we going to do to get video to them? Like knowing all of that, knowing the fact that they want, unfettered access, quick video as possible. Video is a safety thing here. My first inclination is let's make sure we get them the NVRs access. So we're going to use the NVRs HDMI solution. That's my first suggestion there. Um, and this is going to be plugged into either a large display or a TV, and that's going to enable that constant video access. It's always going to be there. So when they first get there in the morning to open up the place, the video is there. When they close, the video is there. There's nothing that they have to do to get it up and running. Um, and the employees don't have to do anything or learn anything about the video. It's just there. It's just their eyes at that point. Again, no PC, so there's little to no maintenance required for this setup. It's just basically always going to work once we set it up. So one of the questions that we have as well is what if the NVR is actually somewhere else? What if we can't put the NVR here at the front desk? What if the NVR is in, the IT closet over here? And that happens very frequently where, they've already decided at this point where the NVR and where the infrastructure is being run to. And now we realize, man, we really want a direct HDMI output here to the front desk on a TV. How do we actually accomplish that? A lot of times moving the NVR is not an option because we run all these cables into this room, or it doesn't really make a lot of sense to run them over there, or whatever the situation is. So moving the NVR is very rarely the first thing we can kind of do. Sometimes it's an option, but a lot of times it's not. So how do we get this NVR's view if it's over here to a display directly through HDMI that's over here? And that's where we go into the HDMI extenders. So the HDMI extenders over CAT are really great ways of being able to extend that local displays and all its benefits across a large section of the facility. So the HDMI extenders allow both the HDMI and even the USB connection to go hundreds of feet. And so let me show you what this looks like a little bit. And this looks a little complicated, so hopefully I can break it down as easily as possible. But um, the first thing is like here on the NVR. So we got a transmitter and a receiver. And so the transmitter is where the NVR lives. So this would be in this IT closet. And you can see that we plug in the NVR to HDMI. And then we also plug in a USB cable that's included with the one that we sell. And we plug that in. And then we plug this one into power. So it gets, power from the wall. And then from here, we go to Cat 6 cable. And this can go up to 260 feet to the receiver. So on this end, we plug in our mouse and then we plug the HDMI into the display. And then it's basically like we're right there in front of the right there in front of the HDMI if it's direct, just as if it's direct. So you've got the mouse control and display from up to 260 feet away. We do have ones that are longer range now as well if you need it. So hopefully that makes sense. But basically, really what it comes down to, as long as we have a CAT cable run between the NVR and the display, we can deliver the same exact experience that you would have if it's plugged in directly. So I gotta ask Dylan, how much sense does that feel like it's pretty makes sense there or
It was good. The visual helps.
cool? All right. Just
Yeah.
want to make sure because sometimes this can be a little confusing. But
No, for sure.
um, so in that case, if it's in this situation where they go, oh yeah, that's a great idea. We want that NVR for all the reasons you just mentioned. How am I going to get it there though if it's over here? We just use the HDMI extender and deliver it over here. So kind of simple. We'd have to run a CAT cable across, but that's definitely better than um, having to get a PC or something like that. Request number two that they're going to have is that they need also live video on TVs in three spots around the facility. And this is because employees are either, stationed there or they're going to be walking around and they want to just be able to quickly look up and see that video as well. Now we've already used the HDMI and the NVR. What else can we possibly use in this case? And you can see here's the spots that they want to view them from. So we got one up here, one down here, and um, in this case, they just need to be able to see video there. So like, what is the options in that we can do with? Um, this is where we start to ask a little bit more questions, right? Are all three of the displays unique? So for example, are they just going to be the same cameras on every single one of these displays? That could be something that we end up utilizing. So like one of the things we can do as well is use an HDMI splitter. So this is one of the other AV products that we use to help deliver that. So a splitter basically just grabs that one HDMI feed, and here's kind of what it looks like. So you plug in the NVR, the decoder, or any other HDMI source, and it allows you to output four different HDMI sources. Now the key thing here is this is just a mirror. So all it's doing is duplicating that output for multiple displays. So if they are doing the same display for all these different areas, whether it's the front desk and those three other platforms, we could use an HDMI um, output and use it as a splitter and get it to all of them, and they would all see the same thing. And that could be a simpler way of delivering that video versus maybe a decoder or a lower cost solution, I should say, as well. But what if, if we look at this kind of the layout here, you can see one's here in the open jump spot zone, one's in the dodgeball zone, and the other one's in the playground that's upstairs. Um, More than likely they're going to need separate video, right? The people in the playground, the dudes on the playground spot here, he's going to want to see the playground cameras. The one on the dodgeball area, probably going to want to see the dodgeball camera specifically. And then the one on the jump house, probably going to want to see those, aka the Matrix here, I guess. I should make sure I use those names.
Love it.
But but what if they do have different needs? Well, that gets into where I'd probably start to look at decoder. So in that solution, we have a couple different options, right? We could have the decoder live in the same room as the NVR, which would be over here. Oops, sorry. And we could have that 6 HDMI decoder, use extenders as well to get that video across to these areas. Option two, when it comes to decoders, is now we've got the one HDMI decoder. So we could actually install a single decoder at each of these locations. All we would need was a network access point to be able to set that up and configure it. And so we would plug that one HDMI decoder into the TV using the HDMI, and then configure it to get all the cameras in the Matrix or the Coliseum over here. So. And so yeah, lots of flexibility there. You could also use a PC in that scenario too, especially if it's maybe less common and your employees are a little bit more technically inclined and that you can deal with all of the potential distractions from the Windows updates and everything else. But that would probably be my third, offering if that's something they already have. I would definitely suggest decoders before I suggest the PCs in this application, just because it is, again, an unfettered access. So. And this is where I think it's a good point to bring up the fact that this can get complicated, right? Every single scenario is different, and there's a lot of options in each scenario, each with their own pros and cons, each with a different cost to each of them, whether it's in terms of like the actual equipment cost or the ongoing maintenance cost. Every scenario is different, and so one of the things I would definitely make sure is that if you've got these complicated video requirements, whether it's a single room or it's distributed across the facility, that you bring in an expert to it. And um, one of the things I always, we try to stress in this when we start to get the idea of, what the system's going to be used for, how it's going to be utilized in terms of live video, is that we design the systems to make sure that that video access is part of the overall security solution, right? And not an afterthought, because a lot of times what happens when it becomes an afterthought and it's an add-on after the fact, it doesn't become a good solution. You start to you grab the old PC from the warehouse, and you realize that this is lagging and it's freezing when you're watching a kid roughhouse or whatever at John's Jump House. And so um, thinking about this while you're doing your system for the first time or as you're renovating the system is a really good point, and that's something that we try to make sure that we do as part of our total solution. So point being is you definitely want an expert on your side if this is a big part of your rollout. And with that being said, that's kind of the end of this webinar. Happy to answer some any additional questions that you guys have, or about video access or anything else that kind of was in this. And um, I do see one of the questions we have in terms of like the troubleshooting. So going back to the decoders over here, go back to the image. There we go. Yeah, so if you plug in a mouse or keyboard to that, you're just not going to see a cursor. It just doesn't even have that capacity. So that's why you could plug in a mouse, it's just not going to work. The USB is specifically for like recovery in case there's a firmware issue, because these do have firmware and everything. So if the firmware update does break when you do it from your computer, you have ability to kind of fix it. So you plug in like a flash drive and it would know that the firmware is installed on it when it's booting up. But that's basically it for the USB. It's not decoders are designed to be a static wall rather than be the operator. That's where we get the NVR or the PC involved there too. And are there any options for two-way audio? So that's a really good question. Most of our NVRs when they actually output to HDMI delivers both video and audio. So, if you have audio on that TV, for example, speakers connected to it, you can do HDMI from there. You can do it from the software. So any of our cameras that have a built-in microphone and speaker, which is a decent amount of them these days, you can do two-way audio. And I do want to mention as well, we are actually going to be adding here in the coming months a external loudspeaker too that you'll be able to operate from both of those. So that way you can have a louder, especially in like loud facilities. The camera speakers are not the loudest for that. This would definitely give you another option for that. So you can use it from your software in the computer, the NVR directly, or even your smartphone in that case. So a lot of people will use it from there. Another question is, and this is another really good one, for NVRs and PCs, they need firmware updates or Windows updates regularly. Do decoders need any firmware or software updates? And that, yes, they do have their own firmware and software, just like an NVR. And like the NVRs, they are cloud accessible too, so you'll be able to do a cloud update with them. Now, I would say the frequency of that is much less frequent than, Windows, of course, and even the NVRs. Um, it's more there to fix any kind of bugs or any kind of security concerns, but it's definitely a little less frequent than either of those for sure, especially Windows updates. We get those every day, it feels like. So, and the next one is there a way to send a particular camera to a web interface for like example like real time of an outdoor area on our website? That's actually a really good question. A lot of times, people are wanting to give live video access to the outside world without having them log in and everything like that. It's kind of almost the opposite of a how a security system usually works in the sense that it's locked down and everything like that. We want this to be a more open. We've had ones that are broadcasting maybe like church services or showing like there's so many ones we've done like one that was like a puppy or dog grooming place and they wanted to show the video of the dog being groomed on their website. So you go see what your puppy's doing when he's getting groomed or whatever. Watch the video if you wanted to. And they there's a lot of options to do that. In terms of usually you need some kind of extra device though. Like so you can grab the what's known as the RTSP stream. So this is basically the pure video feed that's coming off the NVR. And there are both like devices and services online that will turn that RTSP stream into something that can be embedded on a website. So I'd look into like RTSP to embedded video maybe, and that would do it. But yeah, it's definitely possible. Just requires a little bit of setup and ingenuity a little bit, but it is possible. All right. And while we wait for any kind of last questions to roll in there, thank you guys again for attending and the engagement there. Dylan, anything else you wanted to add on in terms of like the follow-up emails and everything that's going to come through this?
I think that's it. We're gonna send the recording after this with some Q&A, and then yeah, anyone where we replied, we would get back with the port to follow up. We'll make sure that happens as well. Um, Other than that, that was good. I learned a lot today. Thanks, James.
Awesome. Yeah, looks like we got one last question here. Do your devices need a separate ground other than the three-prong plug? I do know the decoders highly recommend doing a ground that is separate from there. The NVR is a little less so, but I do know the decoders do suggest that. So, all right. And again, if you have any additional questions or you kind of want us just to look at, you're considering a security camera system or you're considering, hey, we have a system and we need to kind of get better video access to our facility, certainly let us know, reach out. We'll happy to be look at you on a more individual case and offer the, suggest the best solutions. Sometimes these calls, like I mentioned, like they're in itself, we may already have the cameras placed and everything like that, and then we spend another, bit of time to make sure we get the right solution for, the actual video access as well. So, um, yeah, there's no other questions. We'll go ahead and end this webinar. Appreciate everyone's attendance, and we'll see you on the next one.
See you guys.
Take
Thanks.
care, everybody.